As an otaku geek with pure genius programming skills, Tsubasa Kurata has always been fascinated with the world of robots and AI. The young prodigy grew up to be one of Tokyo's best action figure programmers. One night as he's about to leave work, Kurata finds his employees complaining about a particular project they had no time to finish. According to the typical human calculations, the project would take an average programmer lots of hours to do and they're already closed. Kurata keeps up his signature smile and urges his people to leave things in his hands. At that instant, Kurata gets back to his desk and codes the entire thing. He manages to finish the job on time and save his colleagues their leisure. His colleagues are nothing but grateful for his help. On his way back home, Kurata branches at his local convenience store to get some brand new action figures and anime. Sadly, on his way back home, he gets into a road accident that takes his life. It doesn't take long for people to gather and mourn the passing of the greatest programmers Tokyo has ever seen. A few months after his death, Kurata is reborn into another world as Ernesty Echevalier, where magic and supernatural things like demons exist. Now Ernesty is a bright young boy with similar qualities and knowledge as Kurata. One evening, on their way back to their kingdom, Ernesty, his mother, Celestina, and his grandpa are attacked by a group of venomous giant mosquitoes. While discussing things with his mother, Ernesty's grandpa steps out of the carriage to see what's up. He finds the bugs feeding on their horses and pounces on them. The bugs try to escape, but Ernesty's grandpa catches up to them and slashes them open. Ernesty's mom, Celestina, also leaves Ernesty in the carriage. When they're not looking, a giant bug lifts the heavy carriage with Ernesty still inside it. Grandpa and Celestina are helpless as they pray for their kid's safety. Just when they're about to give up hope, a silhouette knight arrives at the scene and takes out the bug, saving Ernesty in the process. Ernesty stares at the robot that came to help him and is shocked at how similar it is to the ones in his former world. The silhouette knight, which is a man-driven robot with size and strength matching that of the bug, fights fair and square with the robot and puts it down with a few tactical moves. All Ernesty could do at the time was watch the incredible robot take down the bug right before his eyes. Moments after taking down the bug, the pilot of the robot, Matthias, steps down from the cockpit to say hi. Ernesty rushes over to the giant machine and hugs it. Matthias explains his job to him. Matthias and a few other select knights aka the Night Runners are known for taking on arduous missions like that to save the kingdom of Fremavilla. It's the year 1268 and Ernesty made it his life's mission to become a silhouette knight one way or the other. Born with superior intellect, Ernesty took it upon himself to study and hone his magic abilities in the academy city of Layala near the capital of Kankanen. For 3 years, Ernesty studied the entire basics of magic and mana from start to finish. During his leisure time, he'd watch silhouette knights and learn their encoding. 3 years pass and Ernesty becomes old enough to own a wand and cast spells. One night, Ernesty, or Ernie, saves a young girl from falling off a roof. The girl, who's named Addie, is so impressed at how cute and cuddly her savior, Ernie, is. Her friend, Archide, aka Archie, stops by to check up on her and thank Ernie for saving him. After seeing what Ernie could do, both friends ask Ernie to teach them the tricks around magic. Ernie initially refuses to do so but then agrees to help them after much persuasion. Later on, Ernie and his people join the Academy of Night Runner to learn the ropes around being a silhouette knight. In his first class, Ernie gets cocky and asks his teacher to let him attend middle school classes. The teacher, of course, refuses to let him do such a thing. According to him, Ernie didn't have a broad understanding of the basics and also lacked the height needed to be a silhouette knight. After class that day, while hanging out with his friends, Ernie gets the bright idea to learn all the fundamentals as soon as possible so he can become a silhouette knight quickly. As he mouths his plans to his people, 3 bullies pass by with a little dude's hammer. The dude chases after but is too slow to catch up to them. Ernie stops and asks him why he needs the hammer so much. The dude tells him he uses the hammer to make metal parts for the robot's body. Ernie appreciates his work and uses his magic to retrieve the hammer. To return the favor, the hammer dude takes Ernie and his friends to his father's workshop for a tour around the place. There, Ernie gets the idea to modify his magic wand to resemble a gun. Naturally, Addie and Archie protest this, but Ernie already has his mind set on modifying his gun. He asks the hammer dude about it and he agrees to help him. A few days later, the teachers of Ernie's class organize a small demonstration where the students come and try out spells they've learned so far. At the test venue, Ernie begs the teacher to let him attend middle school class. Tired of his yapping, the teacher promises to pass him on the condition that he makes a high-profile magic spell to destroy the targets. Ernie smiles, takes out his gun-modified wand and breaks all 5 of the targets. Everyone is shocked at the awesome display of skill. Eventually, Ernie is promoted to middle school and starts attending classes with them. 3 years later, Ernie turns 12. On a fateful day, he sneaks up to a large building to check out some fresh batch of silhouette knights produced. There, Ernie complains to his friend about how old the knight designs are. Just then, Ernie's friends stop by and call him to join them. At that point, the night runners hop into a few silhouette knights and escort the students to a dangerous forest for their field trip. By nightfall, Ernie and his friends eat a nice dinner in their camp. Addie's elder sister shows up to check up on her little sister. When she finds out Ernie's her sister's friend, she commends him and thanks him for being such a good friend to her sister. Later on, she leaves the little kids to continue their discussion. After a few small talks, Ernie sneaks out of camp to check out the silhouette knights. One of the senior night runners, Edgar, walks towards Ernie and explains a few things about the silhouette knight in front of him. Shortly afterwards, he allows Ernie to take a look at the machine. Ernie happily does so and gets hands-on experience with the robot. Moments later, a few demon beasts approach their camp. Thankfully, the scouts get wind of them quickly so they have enough time to get into their knights and prepare the students for the evacuation. After getting all the students into the carriage, Edgar, Heliv, Diet, and a few other select knights take the fight to the beasts. Addie and Archie help their elder sister take down a few beasts. Not so far away, a behemoth arrives and threatens the capital. One of the night runners from the kingdom identifies the behemoth and relays the information to his superiors. However, the superiors, who seem to have something sinister planned, urged him to run off into the capital to inform the others. After he's gone, the superiors prepare themselves to fight the behemoth. They all suit up in their silhouette knights and fire at the behemoth. The behemoth, whose entire body is made up of very hard armor, blocks their attacks and races towards the city. It doesn't take long before it moves past the night runners and blows a hole in the city wall. In the meantime, the students stop for a while to assess the damage done to their camp and possibly anybody. They identify a few wounded people and carry them to safety with stretchers. Addie's elder sister hugs Ernie for helping her take out the demon beasts. Ernie, on the other hand, keeps wondering about the elephant in the room. He thinks the horde is just too many for them to attack in one direction. That's not their usual pattern. He suspects they may be running from something or someone. He just doesn't know what yet. At that moment, arrives at the capital and informs the generals of the behemoth. As they try formulating a plan to take out the behemoth, one of them mentions the students in Cloquet Forest taking a test. This puts the generals on their toes as they hasten up to protect the students. In a matter of minutes, the behemoth finds the students' hideout and attacks it. Helvi, Edgar, and the other night runners suit up and buy the students time to escape the behemoth. While the others run for dear life, Ernie stands back to learn some things about the enemy. Diet, who's one of the night runners, and his friend get forward and rush into the behemoth's mouth, despite being warned by their leader, Edgar. Sadly for them, the behemoth destroys Diet's friend. Seeing this, Diet makes a run for it. He races for the dense vegetation, crying for his life. Ernie spots him and chases after him. He then finds Diet's silhouette knight down and out with Diet crying inside it. Without thinking, Ernie opens the hatch and hijacks the silhouette knight from the coward. Then, he sits in the cockpit and tries to pilot it. Again, he was too short to reach the controls. This pisses Ernie off a little, so he decides to try something. He uses his mana to control the silhouette knight and bring it back to life. Surprisingly, this works, and soon enough, the silhouette knight is back on its feet. Ernie amps up the power, reaching the knight, and races towards the behemoth at amazing speeds. Back on the battlefield, Edgar and his team take very heavy fire from the behemoth as it isn't letting down anytime soon. Luckily for them, Diet's robot shows up and joins the fight. The behemoth defends itself, but Ernie keeps on attacking and testing the various attack patterns the silhouette knight has to offer. After a short practice, Ernie figures it out. Apparently, the monster was using a magic enhancement to support its huge frame. Now all he needs to do is to hit the behemoth where it hurts the most and hopefully bring it down. He tries going for the eyes, but the behemoth closes it before Ernie can get there. This doesn't stop Ernie as he continues searching for a way to take down the behemoth. Soon, the other knights join them on the battlefield with their infamous cluster bunkers. They use the cluster bunkers to punch a hole in all 4 limbs of the behemoth. Still, it refuses to go down. The behemoth returns the attacks and even destroys a few of the robots in the process. Ernie gets pissed and charges at the behemoth with murderous intent. On the way, his silhouette guardian starts to break down from the fatigue. Ernie pauses a little and urges Diet to take the wheel while he tries something else. This time, He steps out of the night and uses the air bullet magic attack to create sonic booms that stop the behemoth in his tracks. When the behemoth gets close enough, Ernie gives Diet the go-ahead to jump back and release the electric fields of the night. Diet follows Ernie's lead and shocks the behemoth to oblivion. Since its eyes were open, the electricity got to its brain and short-circuited it. The behemoth dies shortly and Edgar gets close to Diet's silhouette knight. Thinking Diet is dead, Edgar and his people pay their respects. However, they get the shock of their life when Ernie arrives with Diet. Ernie says hi and gets back to his other friends who are more than happy to get him back. Soon, word of Ernie's bravado gets to the king. This impresses him so much that he requests to have a meeting with the 12-year-old boy who took down a division-level demon beast like a behemoth. Later that same day, Ernie and his grandpa meet with his royal highness. The king expresses his happiness over housing a real-life prodigy. Firstly, he thanks Ernie for his contribution to taking down the division-class beast. Then, to repay him for his hard work, the king asks him to name anything he wishes to have so he'll get it done for him. Ernie thinks a little bit about this and tells the king that he wants to know how to make an ether reactor, which is the heart of every silhouette knight and also a trade secret of the kingdom of Fremville. Naturally, the king's subordinates protest against this, but then again the king asks Ernie what he wishes to do with such important knowledge. Ernie impresses the king further when he tells the whole court that he wishes to modify the silhouette knights and make them better. The king decides to give Ernie a shot. He agrees to Ernie's wish and grants him access to the secret knowledge on the condition that Ernie recreates the body of any silhouette knight. Piece of cake for Ernie as he thanks the king for the opportunity and leaves. The next day, Addie's father, Akka the Marquis of Salati, summons his daughters back to his house to see them. There, he indirectly asks them to be spies for him and report Ernie's progress to him first. Addie and her elder sister have no objections to that as they smell nothing sinister going on. At that instant, Ernie and David, the lead mechanical engineer, assess the wreckage of Diet's Silhouette's knight. While he complains about the horrible shape the knight is in, Ernie stops by to admire the beauty of the wreckage. Hammer Dude from earlier quickly rushes to take him away so he doesn't annoy David. However, David, who seems to have taken an interest in what Ernie has to say, calls him back to listen to all he has to say. David spends the next hour or so listening to the absurd ideas Ernie had in his head. According to Ernie's theory, he can help David create a knight that would supersede the other existing knights. David decides to try him out. Soon, Ernie introduces David and the entire workshop to crystal fiber. After explaining all there is to know about the fiber, Ernie demonstrates it to them. David's impressed at this, so he allows Ernie to work with them. Soon, Edgar and Helvey show up to check up on their knights. They find Ernie there talking and explaining his crazy interesting ideas to the group. After getting past the crystal fiber, Ernie moves to the next level and pitches the idea of making 2 more arms on each silhouette knight. David and the others complain about it being too much for the pilot, but Ernie explains the simplicity of the arms. The arms won't be a stress to the pilot if all it does is hold the wand and shoot magic beams from it. David is pissed at first, but then again, he's super interested in this strange new boy. After work that day, Addie and Archie meet up with Ernie and beg him to carry them along next time he's on an important mission. Naturally, Ernie agrees to that. The following day, Ernie takes permission from the principal to give him a little more time and manpower to complete his silhouette knight. The principal grants him both and Ernie gets back to work. This time, he relays all his ideas to the lot and gets down to work on the mechanics. Ernie and his employees work throughout that day and create prototypes to fit even the smallest night runner there is. Later that day, Edgar, Diet, and a few others test out the prototypes and even play tag with them. When they're done with the main models, David and Ernie ask Helvey to test them out. Helvey moves a little with the robot and then gets down to report the drawbacks and improvements to the engineers. Ernie urges her to get back into the night and test out the new targeting system they installed there. Although the accuracy still needs a lot of work, the targeting system works just fine. Diet, who seems to have snapped out of his fear, is happier than ever to finally see some improvements in the silhouette knights. To test the new knights further, David and Ernie organize a simple spar between Edgar, who's in the old knight, against Helvey, who's in the new and improved silhouette knight. The spar begins with both sides throwing punches and laser beams at each other. After receiving enough hits, Edgar charges towards Helvey and pins her down. Helvey uses some sort of martial arts technique to pull Edgar to the ground. As she's about to slash the robot open, she runs out of mana and loses the whole fight. That night, everyone drank to celebrate the success of the project so far. While everyone thinks they're finally at the end of the project, Ernie tells them that he's just getting started. During the celebration, a suspicious person exits the room and reports his findings to a weird woman drinking in a separate room with a bunch of men. Turns out not everybody's happy with Ernie's success. The next day, Ernie and his band of merry engineers return to the drawing board to tackle their most pertinent problem. It turns out their new silhouette knight drains way too much mana in a short time. So, to fix this, they decided to change the form to accommodate a little mana discharge at a time. While they're at it, Ernie and his friends test out the smaller man-sized prototypes they manufactured on the side. They test out the chain feature, the arrow features, and a few more special features Ernie added to the prototype. Then, they return to the main building to check on the new design for the silhouette knight. Ernie and his dudes are a bit disappointed about the Knight Runner's size. There are still some things that need fixing. Ernie gets back to class and rethinks his design on the other knights while trying to figure out the best way to modify his own. Eventually, he considers the Telestale Knight complete. As for the others, he just has to be serious about them. After school, he returns to the engineer with his grandpa. There, they discuss a few more things they should worry about, like how the lab would react if they found out the new and improved design was built by a boy with extensive knowledge. Not too far away, Addie and Archie contemplate telling their father about the progress Ernie's made on the knights. They decide to tell him first before the lab takes credit for all of Ernie's work. That night, Marquis Dixgard sends a missive to Ernie's grandpa requesting an audience with the students who created the new batch of silhouette knights. As soon as he receives the missive, Ernie's grandpa allows Dixgard's knights to select all the students involved in the creation of the silhouette knights. After hearing all the guards have to say, David, Ernie, and all the others involved in the creation of the silhouette knights immediately begin marching towards Dixgard's fortress. Unknown to them, one of the sinister people working against them had already planted a trap for them along the way to the fortress. He draws a purple line to signal an earth shaker worm to the surface anytime it senses a huge shift in weight on the earth. Since the silhouette knights are heavy enough, this shouldn't be a problem for them. Moments later, the knights run into the largest shaker worm they've ever seen. Ernie keeps calm and even gets down from his knight to study the shaker worm's pattern. After getting his information, he leaves the worm in the hands of Edgar and the more experienced Knight Runners. Edgar and his people form a quad-link formation and use it to destroy the Shaker Worm after a few moves. The evil ones back at the capital hear the news about the Shaker Worm's terrible defeat. Rather than wallow in sorrow and regret, they're actually happy and glad that the Silhouette Knights are strong enough to resist their attacks. Elsewhere, Addie throws a fit as she misses Ernie. Seconds later, the Hammer Dude announces the arrival of Edgar and the others. Archie and Addie rush outside to see Ernie and his Silhouette Knight, Telestale. Sadly for them, they're informed that Ernie stayed behind with the Marquis to get some things done. In the meantime, Marquis Dixgard is concerned about Ernesty's success. He knows something is wrong with this success as there are sure to be jealous eyes watching over him. There's something he doesn't know and wishes to find out for himself. Meanwhile, Stefania, Addie's elder sister, arrives at her father's office to talk to him. After clearing the room, she confronts her father, asking him why he told Marquis Dixgard about Ernie's project. Before she gets her answer, the scene shifts to the next one. In this scene, Marquis Dixgard summons Ernie to teach him the entire mechanical and electrical part of his Silhouette Knight, Telestale. Ernie happily does this, but then again, he complains about the ether reactor being too old for some of his better designs to work with. After hearing all that the young boy has to say, Dixgard tells Ernie point blank that he would be the one taking credit for all of Ernie's work. He asks Ernie to make sure he's okay with that. To his surprise, Ernie has no problem with that. This pisses Dixgard off as he doesn't understand why Ernie wouldn't want recognition. Ernie tries to explain himself, but Dixgard cuts him off and lets him know just how important his work is. He feels Ernie is underestimating 300 years of hard work as his new design surpasses all of the former designs they've ever built. Ernie cuts him short and tells him there's still more to come. At this point, Dixgard calms himself and succumbs to change. Marquis Dixgard sits down and recalls his younger days. He seemed to be just like Ernie back then, young and full of life and innovations. He then asks Ernie for his motivation behind doing all this. Ernie tells him it's his hobby. Nothing more, nothing less. Dixgard calms down fully and lets the 12-year-old be. Elsewhere, Addie's dad arranges a meeting with his kids to discuss the reason why he made Ernie meet the Marquis. Thankfully, there's nothing sinister about the meeting. As Dixgard takes his morning cup of coffee, Ernie takes out his journal and explains just how wide his knowledge of the Silhouette Knight is. Marquis is shocked at this and allows Ernie to stay over at his place for a few more days. At this point, Addie was already throwing tantrums as she missed Ernie. Everyone in the workshop tries to calm her down, but Addie begins thinking of something weird. She asks her people to break into the Marquis fortress and reclaim Ernie for themselves. However, they advise that'll be bad for business. David gets an idea and pitches a peaceful way to reclaim Ernie from the Marquis. A few days later, demon beasts attack Dairy Village. Being a part of Fremble Kingdom, Dairy Village sends a distress signal to the capital, and they send Silhouette Knights to help them out. The weird lady from earlier and her minions step out of the shadows to cause more havoc to the capital and force a war. With Ernie so far away, there was no way for him to know about the pivotal event that was about to happen. In the meantime, Diet pilots his new and improved Guar Knight. He flexes the new mechanics and tests out some of the latest upgrades to its armor and all. When asked about his experience, Diet tells David that it's so good that he feels bad to give up Guar to Dixgard. Nonetheless, he gets down from his knight and continues his day's work. Just then, Addie and Archie arrive in carriages filled with small man-driven prototype knights, the ones that Ernie made for the three of them. Before leaving for the fortress, David checks to make sure they have permission to take such high-profile machinery along. Thankfully, they do. Edgar and Dietrich, aka Diet, set off with David, Addie and Archie and escort them to the Marquis fortress. Moments after defeating the demon beasts at Dairy Village, the Night Runners send an emissary to the capital to relay the situation to the king and the others. On his way to the capital, the emissary is attacked by the weird woman and her people. They kill the Night Runner and hijack his Silhouette Knight. Then, they all conceal themselves in carriages and continue their journey to Dixgard's fortress. By nightfall, the Order of the Bronze Fang, which is the Weird Woman's group, arrives at the fortress and is welcomed into the inner walls. The Weird Woman and her minions walk towards the workshop where the newer knight models are made. There, they reveal themselves and shoot down the workers there before hijacking the newer models. The Weird Woman and her people then begin terrorizing other parts of the fortress by firing magical laser beams at buildings and residential areas. Inside his castle, Dixgard and his right-hand man begin thinking of their next move. Ernie suggests they let him go to the battlefield to take down the Silhouette Knights. However, Dixgard didn't want to put his partner's life at risk. Instead, he sends his own men, the Hammerwort Squad, to the battlefield to fight off the Weird Woman and her minions. The Hammerwort Squad immediately gets into formation to confront the Weird Woman. Their leader faces the woman head-on and charges at her. However, Lady Kurhilt, who is the Weird Woman, dodges his attacks and retreats from the fight. They've finally gotten their hands on the newer model of the Silhouette Knights so they don't have to risk any other thing. On their way out of the fortress, they run into Edgar, Diet, and the other three as they arrive at the fortress with their new gear to see Ernie. Without thinking twice, Kurhilt mistakes them for reinforcements and attacks them. She and her men begin shooting laser beams at the enemy. Edgar and Diet are forced to retaliate while David drives Addie and Archie to safety. Diet takes on Kurhilt's henchmen while Edgar pursues Kurhilt. Eventually, Archie and Addie join the fight in their man-driven prototype suits, but they're almost too late. In the end, Diet manages to subdue Kurhilt's henchmen. However, he loses concentration for a short period and the henchman disables his mech with an EMP. On the flip side, Archie and Addie catch up to Edgar and tag along to help capture the thief who stole their mech. Ernie, on the other hand, gets a little concerned at his laziness. He makes up his mind to help his friends but then again, wonders how he's going to do so since there's no mech for him to use. Just when he's about to give up hope, he sees David arrive at the fortress with his carriage. Ernie flies down to the carriage and uses the last man-driven mech left to help him on his mission. He pilots the small machine and uses it to manually disable the other mech robots the enemies are using. When he's done, he relays his new plan to retake their stolen telestale. Upon hearing everything, Ernie gets down to business. Meanwhile, Kurhilt and another one of her people keep running towards the border with Edgar and the two kids hot on their tail. Eventually, they get sick of the entire thing and decide to attack them. Kurhilt takes on Edgar while her other henchman tries to sabotage them. Archie stops him from sabotaging Edgar by leading him to a trap he mistakenly set. The henchman, after falling into the trap, trips and falls into a lake which disables his mech. In the meantime, Kurhilt keeps on fighting Edgar. She manages to overpower and pin him down. Then, she slashes a huge hole in Edgar's Earlcumber before escaping with the telestale. Soon, Diet and the others arrive at Edgar's location and tend to him. They contemplate pursuing the telestale but are stopped in their tracks as a horde of demon beasts attack them. Everybody stops to face the horde of the demon beasts attacking them. Soon enough, they defeat all of them in one night and return to the capital to be heroes. Marquis Dixgard and his right-hand man contemplate who could be behind the Bronze Fangs. After much contemplation, They concluded it had to be orchestrated by another country. A few days later, the king summons Ernie and his people to the palace and formulates a new order named the Order of the Silver Phoenix. This order would be tasked with R&Ding various improvements for their mechs. He places Ernie as head of the new order and urges him to do a good job building better mechs in the future. In the meantime, Helvi visits Edgar in the hospital. There, he promises to get back her knight one way or the other. On their way back to their town, Ernie dreams about his robots. In this dream, Ernie could see his limited edition robot run away from him. He quickly wakes up and finds Addie sleeping on him. He tried waking her up, but Addie was already too far gone. Eventually, he ends up teasing her and forcing her to wake up. In the meantime, the Telestale's base design was sent to the Silhouette Night lab for more study. The scientists there struggle to decipher the algorithm behind the crystal tissue material. The chief of the laboratory, Chief Gazka, gets pissed off at his people for being so slow with things. A few minutes later, the director of the laboratory, Director Alvar, shows up and teases Gazka about his own understanding of the Telestale designs. Gazka avoids any incriminating questions and excuses himself from Alvar. That night, Gazka promises to do something that'll restore the king's faith in them. That's the only way they can beat the Order of the Silver Phoenix and get back on track. Dixgard, in a meeting with the king, explains his findings after investigating the Bronze Fang. Turns out the Bronze Fang were all mercenaries sent from the Occident Kingdom to upset the peace between Fremdal and the other surrounding nations. Now that they're with one of their Telestales, there's no telling what they have planned for the future. The king, however, is hopeful for what Ernie and his team have planned for them. At that instant, Ernie's family finds out about his promotion. Although they're a bit surprised, they remain happy about the recognition. The following day, Ernie arrives at the workshop with another modified version of the man-driven miniaturized mech bot. This bot is a service bot that can help the workshop guys deliver heavy-duty equipment much faster. Seeing this, David and the others are very surprised and impressed at Ernie's innovation. Ernie informs them about the mechanics and allows them to use the miniature knights as they wish. Up next, Ernie and his people all line up to sign a partnership with the Marquis Knights to work together with them. They also receive a message from the Royal Highness. Apparently, the king had organized a friendly spar between the Silhouette Night Lab and the Order of the Silver Phoenix in 10 months' time. In this period, the two parties were to build the best mechanized robots, and then display them to the king and other important officials of the state. On hearing this, Ernie and his team get very encouraged to surpass their limits. Almost immediately, Ernie presents the new plans he made for his robots and showcases them to the team, as the others work on the design. Ernie continues cooking up more impressive designs to drop jaws when the tournament comes. A few months of intensive building and testing pass by as the big event draws near. After graduation, David recruits new people to join the workshop and work with the Order of the Silver Phoenix. At their induction, Edgar and the others introduce them to their boss, Ernie, and they're all surprised. After the induction speech, Ernie meets with the private investigator he hired to fish out the traitor who leaked his secret to the enemy. According to her findings, she found the rat amongst the students but still hasn't discovered who was truly behind the Telestale incident. Ernie thanks her for her hard work and urges her to do more. Addie, who was eavesdropping on Ernie's conversation, gets jealous of the detective as Ernie seems to take her seriously. As soon as the detective's gone, she barges into the room and demands Ernie allow her to pilot a Silhouette Knight. Surprisingly, Ernie agrees to let her ride. In the next scene, Ernie powers up his latest invention and ends up getting blown into the forest. After the accident, his colleagues rush after the trail and find him unconscious in the machine. Ernie wakes up a little while later and continues talking about improvements to be made to the machine. His friends stop him from talking too much and remind him just how pissed David would be when he finds out his latest invention has been destroyed. Ernie and his friends get back to the workshop and report to David. David scolds Ernie greatly for destroying such a beautiful machine and tells him to reduce his innovative thinking till they get past the loss. Without even thinking twice, Ernie tells them about the next big thing. This time, he plans to build a machine powered and controlled by two people's mana. In a matter of days, the machine's complete and he allows Archie and Addie to pilot it. As expected, the new design fails, but this doesn't stop Ernie from making improvements. Helvi takes Addie out to the river to bathe and clean up while the boys do all the heavy lifting. As they enjoy the cool water, Ernie and the others remain in the workshop. Ernie creates a key system and gives one of the prototypes to Edgar. This way, only the key holder can operate a silhouette knight. Edgar tests the key and figures out the kinks behind it. Soon, Ernie and his team are back and better. They keep on working and working until it's finally time for the spar. On D-Day, Geizka and his people are the first to present their silhouette knights. Although the knights come fitted with new software and mechanics, the overall design still looks archaic. Geizka gives the king a long explanation of the new knights. After hearing all he has to say, the king commends him for his hard work and gives the floor to the Order of the Silhouette Knights. This time, Ernie and his people make a very dramatic entry. Their dual-piloted mech, having a structure resembling that of a centurion, rushes into the arena and unearths the other knights they designed earlier. The king and everyone there are impressed at the complexity of the design and are eager to see what Ernie's knights can do. Before the fight begins, every knight runner present for the mock battle presents themselves to the king. King Ambrosius of Fremble readies about 4 of Ernie's mechs to fight against 6 of Geizka's mechs. Rather than find the arrangement intimidating, Ernie's excited to finally be having the mock battle after waiting for 10 months. Somewhere around the arena, Prince Amrise, son of Crown Prince Leotamus, finally returns to the kingdom after he's summoned back to the kingdom by the king. Before meeting his grandpa, he hangs around the area to watch the fight go down. A few seconds later, the king gives the order for the fight to begin. Ernie's team charges first and the lab's runners brace themselves for the attack. However, what shocks them is when Ernie activates his super turbo mode. The runners from Geizka don't have enough time to prepare for the defense as Ernie's robot races after them at high speeds. In a single charge, Ernie knocks down one of the runners and leaves the others for the rest of his team. Addie and Archie ride the Centurion and split the enemy team in half. So the plan is to split the enemy team into 2 and make it easier for each of their units to take down. So far so good. This plan seems to be working. Edgar and Dietrich wait for the signal to proceed. When they get it, they join the fight and face the runners head-on. Edgar uses his knowledge and experience fighting to confront the runners. He uses the lightning frail and subdues one of the knights, all while buying time for Ernie to rest up and recover his lost mana. The Aruvian knights from Geizka's team quickly get used to their new enemies. They retaliate and keep Dietrich alongside Edgar in check. What they didn't know was that the 2 of them were buying enough time for Ernie to recover mana in the back. Nonetheless, the king is still impressed at Geizka's men and their tenacity. The fight takes a wild turn as Ernie's men find themselves struggling to keep up with the Aruvians. Thankfully, Ernie finishes charging his mana in time. He gets back to the battlefield even stronger than before and takes down Geizka's men for the win. The king stops the fight and declares Ernie's team the better one. Everybody gets back up and thanks each other for giving it their all. In the meantime, Amrise asks after the bright young guy leading the Order of the Silver Phoenix. Geizka, on the other hand, rushes to meet this Ernesty he's been hearing of. When he finally gets to talk with the little guy, the duo talk like young friends who just found each other after years of being apart. Oliver and Ambrosius talk about Ernesty's new designs. Ambrosius hands over the polishing of the new design to his lab and leaves the innovation to Ernie and his team. Geizka, after talking to the young Ernesty, gets invigorated and finds his passion for Silhouette Knights again. 2 months later, both sides are seen working on upgrades and improvements to their recent builds. Meanwhile, Ambrosius asks for a meeting with his son, Leodamus, and grandson, Amrise. After having them in the same room as him, he finally makes the big announcement. After ruling Fremble for 36 years, Ambrosius is finally stepping down as king and making his crown prince king of the nation. At the same time, Ernie and his team graduate middle school and are now given full freedom to do what they wish. Ernie meets with Amrise for the first time and introduces himself to the prince. Soon, Ambrosius joins them and asks Ernie to create a silhouette knight for himself and his grandson. Naturally, Ernie has no problem with this, so he asks them for specifications they'd like added to their knights. After hearing their thoughts, he gets back to work on the mechs. A season later, the mechs are finished. Ernie makes 2 similar mechs, with one of them being golden in color and the other being silver in color. Sadly, Ambrosius and Amrise choose the golden tiger, with each of them refusing to back down. They decide to settle it with a duel. The duo get into separate silhouette knights and fight it out in a private arena with only Ernie and Addie as their spectator. Ernie gets to see the king's strong use of the spear. According to the legends, the king used to be formidable with a spear. Even the demon beasts feared him back then. Ernie and Addie are glad to see he still has his gimmicks. Amrise, on the other hand, isn't so weak as well. He uses his agility and strength to evade his grandpa's attacks. Eventually, he wins the bout and gets to keep the golden knight. After the fight, Ambrosius succumbs to defeat and takes the silver knight. Elsewhere, the demon horde charges towards one of the most secret places in the kingdom of Fremdal, Ulfheim. News of the shell-cased demon horde attack reaches the king and scares him well enough to pause his annual conference. He quickly calls an emergency meeting with his generals to discuss tactics they can employ to take down such a crazed demon. The shell-cased demon horde, which is one of the most feared demon hordes in all of Fremdal, is a colony-type demon where the individual ant demons cluster themselves around a singular unit called the Queen and follow her around. When it's time to attack or source food, the ant demons detach themselves from their queen and hide her in a safe place while they're out attacking. The king asks about the silhouette knights there, and he's told that they've already formed a line of defense to keep the ant demons at bay. After the meeting, the king calls for Ernie and his team to brief them about the problem at hand. When he gets them in a room, he explains the entire situation to them. Ernie asks him why he's so protective of Ulfheim, and the king tells him that it's because that's where the ether reactors are made. Hearing this, Ernie's eyes open wide and he immediately urges his team to suit up and get ready to ride and defend the birthplace of the ether. At that moment, the Silhouette Knights defending Ulfheim are brought down one by the ant demons. When all hope seems lost, the Order of the Silver Phoenix arrives to completely wipe out the army of ants that came to attack them. Emrise uses his Golden Knight to take down a large chunk of the ants in one fell swoop. The king also joins him and advises Ernie and his people to go find the queen in the forest while they keep fighting the other ants. Ernie thanks the king for the opportunity and heads into the forest with his people. They clear off a few ants on their way there and activate turbo mode as they ride to the forest. On their way to the queen's hideout, Ernie and his people discuss the new additions to his latest night build. Before he finishes his speech, the queen shows up. The ugly thing throws Ernie and the others off balance for a little while, but Ernie stands back on his feet and attacks the queen's legs. When he finds it's doing no harm, he attacks her weak spot, which is the egg sac under her. They manage to destroy her new batch of babies and annoy her well enough to want to kill them. Ernie takes advantage of this and cuts one of her legs. When she's down, he takes out a lightning rod and sticks it in her eye. Then, he sends lightning through her eyes and short-circuits her brain. After winning the battle at Ulfheim, Ernie and his people return to the fortress. As the others discuss with each other, the king finally grants Ernie his wish. He instructs Director Oliver to give Ernie a personal tour around the secret village called Ulfheim where the ether reactors are made. The following day, Oliver takes Ambrosius and Ernie through the mountains to see the place they call Ulfheim. On their way there, Oliver explains his true origins to him. Apparently, the people living there are a rare breed of special people whose lifespan can go as high as 500 years and also grant them larger amounts of mana than the average human. They seem to have semi-eternal youth and have also lived long enough to create special things like the ether reactor. Ernie's really shocked to find out such a locale exists. He sits back and enjoys the ride while anticipating the wonderful things he'd be seeing there. Soon enough, the trio arrive at the beautiful city of Ulfheim. The trio get to meet the great elder of Ulfheim. Kitli, and Ambrosius introduces himself first. Kitli recognizes Ambrosius and returns the greetings. She then thanks Ernie for helping them take down the demon horde and waits to hear what he has to say. Ernie tells her to teach him the ways of making ether. However, Kitli gets defensive and lets Ernie know that he will never reach their level in terms of knowledge. Ernie refuses to let this discourage him. Kitli gives him one last look and then grants Ambrosius' request. Ernie's more than happy to finally learn about the ether reactors. He begins his training immediately and learns that the exchange crystal the Elfhamus used to make mana made use of a special script, Aka, an incantation, an artificial blood created using alchemy to trap ether from the air and turn it into mana. This interests Ernie well enough that, after a demonstration by Director Oliver, he begins to ask questions about every specific part of the ether reactors. Impressed by his interest, the king grants him access to the heart of the behemoth and the mother queen ant. Ernie thanks him and gets down to studying the ether reactors. Meanwhile, his people choose to stay behind and wait for him to complete his sessions there. 3 months later, Ernie finally presents himself in front of the Great Elder again, who thanks him for a peaceful visit and promises to see him again. Hearing this, Ernie expresses his gratitude to her and heads out of the secret city to meet his friends. They all return to the fort to continue the production of the Knights. During production one day, the personal investigator visits Ernie to tell him of the nation seeking to start another war to take down the Occidents. Ernie thanks her for the information and urges them to keep searching for more. As she steps out of Ernesty's office, Addie finds her there again and confronts her for trying to take Ernesty. Nora, who is the Pie, makes it known to Addie that she has him all to herself. A few days later, Ernie's first personal silhouette night was completed. After using 2 ether reactors from the Behemoth and the Queen's Heart, Ernie finally gets ready to give his Ikaruga a test run. While the kingdom of Fremville works on their silhouette knights, Zalodek, which is another kingdom that hates peace, prepares itself for war with the Federation around it. In one scene, the first son of the king of Zalodek, Carlitos Built, gives his men a war speech to incite their spirits well enough for them to fight. He plans to take the fight to the nations surrounding them and take them by force. A month later, the Federation falls and this keeps the Shield Trider on their toes. Shield Trider, which is a nation surrounding the Federation, is led by King Augusti Valio. After hearing all the horrible things Zalodek did to the Federation, the Duke steps out of the war room worried about what comes next for his own kingdom. His daughter, Eleonora, finds him pacing and asks what the matter is. She asks him about the war rumors she's been hearing of recently, but her father lets her know he has everything under control. In the meantime, the knights from the Kushpercha face the Zalodek knights and are defeated in just one day. Their next stop is the Shield Trider. Augusti quickly ups his defenses and urges the knights from the surrounding federations to march onto his own kingdom so they can have enough warriors to fight and defeat the Zalodek army. Little did they know that Zalodek had a trick up their sleeves, as the genius on their team already built a flying warship. Under the cover of night, the warships, Akka the Levitate ships, fly above the Shieldian walls and drop knights, Akka the Tyrantos, directly into Augusti's territory. On landing, the knights begin wreaking havoc on the entire city of Shield Trider. Every attempt to subdue them is futile against the Tyranto army. Even Lady Kurhilt joins the Tyranto's army this time and takes down the majority of Augusti's forces. Seeing the demise of his kingdom, Augusti calls for his daughter and convinces her to escape the city with 2 other ladies so that she can be safe from enemy fire. After she's gone, he gets into his own silhouette knight and faces the enemy with his remaining soldiers. He buys his daughter enough time for her to escape by requesting a duel with Cristobal. Cristobal happily takes the challenge and gets down to fight the king. On their way out of the kingdom, Eleonora refuses to go any further. She wants to get back to her father and save him from certain death. However, her people slap some sense into her head and convince her to survive for the future of Kushpercha. At that instant, the king meets his demise as Cristobal's knights overpower him. The news of Kushpercha's fall immediately reaches the king of Zalodek, and he assigns taking over to his sister, Catalina. In the meantime, Eleonora and her entourage are stopped at the borders of Kushpercha. The guards there harass the entourage a little bit and then capture the princess. The very next day, Ernie and his people ride to the gates of Kushpercha to deliver merchandise to the king. On getting there, they get interrogated by the guards at the gate, who insist they must search their cargo. Imrise and the others lie and wait for enough evidence to reveal itself. After confirming that Kushpercha has been captured by the enemy, they attack. Imrise gets into his golden knight and Ernie uses his new silhouette knight to take down all the enemy knights present there. When he's done, Ernie and his people step out to assess the damage. They find out that the Zalodek army has been using the telestale design Kurhilt stole earlier on. This only encourages Ernie to do much better than now. He instructs his people to gather all the wrecked knights for materials and begin his little crusade to hunt and save those captured by Zalodek. One night, Cristobal, the second son of the king, meets with Eleonora and instructs her to be his wife so he can become king. Eleonora tries to say no, but she's given no choice if she wants to save her kingdom. Cristobal walks out of the room with his henchman, who complains about a measly rebel group that's been taking out their units all over the country. Cristobal instructs his general to take care of the problem as soon as possible to avoid any further intrusions to their plans. As they walk out of the hallway, Lady Kurhilt of the Bronze Fang offers to help the general take care of the rebel problem. With nothing to lose, the general allows her to do what she wants. Nora, the Pie from earlier, reports the entire situation to Ernie after eavesdropping. Hearing this, Ernie and his men immediately plan a rescue mission to recover Eleonora from the wicked Cristobal. At the same time, one of Zalodek's warships finally catches onto Ernie and his people. They follow them for a little while and then prepare to face them head-on. Ernie's guys draw first blood and the Zalodek army retaliates. Everybody suits up and begins fighting for their freedom. Diet finds himself in the midst of a Gustav from Zalodek and is forced to fight his knight with many swords. Gustav uses his knight's speed to his advantage and attacks Diet. However, Diet takes him down and forces the others to retreat. Gustav and his men hook themselves to the warship and fly out of range for Ernesty's people to catch them. Back in the warship, Kurhilt makes fun of Gustav for losing to someone like Diet. Gustav grudgingly thanks her for her help but then promises that he'll never need it again. After the fight with Zalodek's warship, Ernie and Emrise visit the merchant city of Fontaine, which is east of the kingdom of Kushpercha. When they get there, they disguise themselves to resemble normal travelers and sneak into the city. There, they find the entire place desolate and devoid of people. They check out a few streets and return to their hideout. After reuniting with the others, Ernesty and his guys check out their man-driven miniature silhouette knights to make sure they're in top condition for the rescue mission. After doing the maintenance checks, they all set out to rescue Eleonora and her entourage. They all fly through the roofs of the buildings in Fontaine and finally get close enough to see the four-tower layout of the king's mansion in the distance. Nora explains the security levels of the towers to Ernie and the others so they can cook up a plan to infiltrate each tower silently. Since they didn't know which tower Eleonora was in, they split themselves into 4 teams to infiltrate each tower and rescue the entourage and the princess. Ernie gets into the first tower and finds Martina, the wife of Duke Fernando, there sitting and waiting for her punishment. He introduces himself and lets his mission known to her. When the guards come by to check things out, Ernie's already long gone with Martina. At the same time, Emrise saves his sister, Isadola, in another tower. Addie, on the other hand, finds nobody in the 3rd tower. However, in the 4th, Arcee finds the real princess there in a dark room. Before they get the time to talk, the guards sound the alarm. Archie quickly offers his services to Eleonora and urges her to come along with him. Eleonora finally allows Archie to save her after much persuasion. Archie flies her to the forest where she meets the others waiting for her. There, she's reunited with her people and flown to safety. After hearing about the infiltration, the war general from Zalodek orders a fleet of warships to be sent to capture the others immediately. Their nation's genius and creator of the warship, Lord Gajas, tags along to check out the people brave enough to infiltrate their mansion. While tracking the perpetrators, Lord Gajas cannot wait for his levitate ship to finally fight a worthy enemy. The next day, Gajas' warship finally found Ernie. On seeing the warship come towards them, Ernie could not hide his joy and happiness. He quickly pilots his own knight and flies towards the warship to fight the enemy. Gajas is also shocked to see a flying silhouette knight. He orders his men to take down the knight at all costs. Unfortunately for them, Ernie was too strong for them. He takes down all the knights from the warship and sends the Zalodek ship running. Gajas makes a promise that day to surpass Ernie's design and reclaim the skies for Zalodek. Cristobal, the second son of the king of Zalodek, gets very sore after hearing about the overwhelming defeat of his warships. He even gets skeptical at first, but Gajas corroborates the war general's story and tells them about the incredulous prowess of Ernie's knights. Cristobal gets so pissed at this that he orders the war general to get another batch of knights ready to track and take down Ernie's party. A few hours later, Ernie and his people arrive at Nishur, which is a relay station on the old Kushperchan highway. There, they reconnect with their mechanical engineers and present the princess to the others. After the necessary introductions, Ernie gets down to discuss business with Martina and the other elders of the town. He makes a proposal to grant them potential upgrades to their silhouette knights to increase their firepower and endurance. In return, he would need the remnant silhouette knights from the enemy. Martina accepts the deal and allows Ernie to do whatever he wants to the enemy. Soon enough, Cristobal and his war general lay siege to Nishur. However, the Nishirians are already prepared for them as they fire magic laser beams at them and chase them back to their kingdom. Elsewhere, Ernie and his people continue researching new methods to improve their knights to fight the Zalodek warships. At one point, Eleonora, Emrise, and Martina all settle down to discuss a few things before returning to their duties. Apparently, the princess is really depressed about losing her family. As such, she refuses to take the throne to rule over Kushpercha. Emrise is tasked with the responsibility to make her happy again. He returns to Ernie, his partner, and his people. Then, he asks them for ideas on how to make the princess happy again. After much contemplation, they came up with a plan. Archie, her first ever knight, approaches her to cheer her up. Seeing him, Eleonora tells him she can't be happy while several soldiers are out there shedding their blood for the nation. Archie then decides to try another route. He takes her hand and shows her around the workshop. After spending the whole day outside, Eleonora asks Archie why he's being so kind to her. Archie tells her it's because she's a special person to him, nothing more, nothing less. That night, Catalina assigns Kurhilt and her minions a new job. They're to track down the Silhouette Knights and retrieve the Princess of Kushpercha from them alive or dead. Kurhilt refuses to take the job, seeing how difficult it'll be. However, Catalina makes her an offer she couldn't resist, so she gets right down to work. That same night, she sends one of her assassins to kill the princess in her sleep. Sadly for him, he's caught red-handed by Archie and subdued. In the meantime, the other mercenaries sneak into the workshop to take over the Silhouette Knights. Ernie and his people lie and wait for them to fall into their traps. When they're in deep enough, they attack them all and seize back control over their Silhouette Knights. Perhilt, after hearing her people screw up, decides to fight her enemies head-on. She finds Edgar and his Earlcumber tracking her down and decides to fight him, thinking it'll be like last time. Sadly for her, it wasn't, as Edgar wasn't going to let her win this time. Perhilt gets too excited and attacks Edgar blindly. Edgar takes advantage of this and uses it against her. The next day, Eleonora thanks Ernie and his people for saving her again the second time. This time, she looks up and decides to take on the throne of her father's kingdom. On the other end of the world, Cristobal receives important information from his sister, Catalina. This encourages him to go for the pesky Ernie and his band of Little Mary engineers. He rallies his knights and marches towards the town of Nishar. On their way there, they run into several small towns in the Cushperchin kingdom and wipe them off the face of the earth before continuing their journey to the princess's town. Cristobal's fleet consisted of 7 warships, with himself being escorted in the middle. They approached the town of Nishar in the dead of night. To their surprise, however, the entire town was quiet. When they get in close enough, Ernie gives his people the signal to strike. Almost immediately, Archie, Addie, Hammer Dude, and a few others aim and fire spears into the sky to puncture the warships ahead of them. These spears manage to take down ships 5 and 7. Then, Ernie's team reloaded their spears and continued firing. Gajas stays perplexed as he never expected such a thing from Ernie. After suffering heavy attacks, the ships are forced to deploy the Tyrantos. As soon as the Silhouette Knights reach the ground, Edgar and the others come out of hiding to attack the Silhouette Knights. Ernie also gets fired up and ready to join the fight. He pilots his demonic Ikaruga and flies towards the warships. Gajas keeps spying on his arch-nemesis and even swears at him. In a split second, Ernie destroys 2 more ships. Cristobal's generals suggest they retreat, but Cristobal's pride wouldn't let him do such a thing. Instead, he orders his men on the ground to keep moving towards town to crush the princess. Memrise unleashes his Golden Knight and purges a few more of Cristobal's men. Soon, Archie, Addie, and even Ernie join the battle on the ground. Eventually, Cristobal is forced to retreat, and he does so in shame. Instead of following him, Gajas tells his men to stop following the ship and watch what happens for now. At that instant, Ernie's people fire spears at Cristobal's ship and manage to slow down their speed. Then, Ernie rushes after him and finally attaches himself to the ship. After securing his foothold on the ship, he prepares himself to destroy it finally. Just then, Cristobal gets into his Silhouette Knight and gets on top of his ship to attack the Knight Runner, Ernie. Ernie takes the fight to Cristobal and uses the power of his mech to its full extent. At one point in the fight, Cristobal pauses and tries to bring Ernie to his side. However, Ernie explains just how important he is to the kingdom of Fremble, and this makes Cristobal know that he can't be bought. This annoys him so much that he swears at Ernie. Ernie keeps his cool and gives him an option to surrender like a coward. He would get down his knight and surrender it to Ernie so his life would be spared. Cristobal gets so pissed at Ernie that he decides to sabotage himself. He shoots the hull of his warship and goes down with it. The war general and Gajas are surprised that this is their dear prince. Cristobal just killed himself to save his pride. Seeing this, they retreat and live to fight another day. The following day, the heroes return to Nishar to greet Queen Eleonora. Eleonora gets flustered after seeing Archie wounded and tries her best to tend to his wounds. After explaining the situation to Catalina, Gajas promises to make the people who killed her brother pay for their sins. Catalina grants him access to everything he'd need to build the ultimate weapon. The death of the Prince Cristobal sends the army of Zalodic back to their kingdom. On the flip side, Eleonora and her knights are hailed and adored by the people of Fontaine as they get their lands back from the enemy. One day, Archie formally swears his loyalty to Eleonora and allows her to take the podium to address the people of Nishar and Fontaine. At the speech, she offers herself and the services of her dear knight to rebuild the nation to be better than it was before. After that, Ernie and the others get back to work. This time, Ernie finds a weird greenish material he calls etherite. Now this material was Gajas's invention, which he used to create its own ether and turn it into mana. This means their warships and knights won't need ether from the air anymore to be powered. Ernie is perplexed at this invention and finally relates it to why and how the levitate ships were made. He recognizes the inventor of the material as a genius and wishes to meet him one day. After salvaging the enemy wreckage, Ernie returns to the palace to answer an official summon from Eleonora and Martina. On getting there, Martina thanks Ernie for all he's done but then asks him to give them the remains of the enemy Silhouette Knights so they can build their army with them. Ernie agrees to give them the remains on the condition that they also help himself and his team rebuild their own Silhouette Knights. Martina sees no problem with this, so they both come to a deal. In the meantime, David and Hammer Dude complain a little about being left on the side while the others enjoy good food with the Queen. In the next few months, the Kushperchans created more Silhouette Knights and managed to push back the Zalaudek army to their borders. One day, after defeating the last one of the Zalaudek army, Ernie and his people chill out in the plains of Nishur. Just then, they find a very weird warship coming towards them. It turns out the war general was back to avenge the death of Prince Cristobal. When his ship gets close enough, Gajas's warship, Akka the Viver, fires a large laser beam at them. Ernie and his people dodge the attacks, but then again Ernie's glad to finally have a real challenge. He preps himself and gets ready to fight Gajas and his men head-on. After careful assessment of the enemy's warship, Ernie finds out that it was built with the design of a drake to make maneuverability easier to control. Nonetheless, Ernie refuses to be discouraged. Instead, he urges his people to control the crowd to avoid hysteria amongst them while he fights the Viver. The war general doesn't back down either as he approaches Ernie at even higher speeds. Ernie dodges all the Viver's attacks as he studies all he can about the Viver ship. In the meantime, Gustav fights Diet on the ground with his sword-filled knight. Diet keeps up against all of Gustav's attacks and prepares for a counter. Meanwhile, Archie and Addie shoot spears into the air to distract the Viver. This works well enough for Ernie to find an opening. He attacks the opening and damages the port side of the ship. Ernie continues attacking the Viver and forces them to dive downwards to lose a little altitude. The general still refuses to back down as he faces Ernie yet again to continue fighting him. Diet, on the other hand, struggles to keep up with Gustav's quick attacks. He waits for an opening and uses the lightning flare to attack Gustav when he finds it. Then, he uses every last bit of mana left in his knight to create an attack powerful enough to completely destroy Gustav's knight. The Battle of the Skies continues as Ernie outmaneuvers the Viver's attacks. He keeps weakening the Viver's defenses and becomes too fast of an enemy for the Viver to take down. When it comes to it, the war general decides to use his trump card. He deploys a yellow dust containing metal fragments, saltpeter, and sulfur powder. This deadly mixture is sure to bring down any jet engine thrust. Ernie fails to realize the danger he's in and flies blindly into the fumes. Sadly, the mixture works and Ikaruga, Ernie's mech, loses its thrust. Ernie falls to the ground and quickly reorientates himself. Thinking he is vulnerable, the general fires his last mana laser beam at Ernie. Ernie sees the attack coming and then returns an equal amount of mana to them. At that point, the Viver was already out of mana, so the war general has to withdraw and end the battle in a tie. Ernie and his team take a major L that day as they realize their enemies may be just as strong, if not stronger than them. Ernie promises to make sure the jet thruster doesn't fall under such conditions again. He gets back to the drawing board and continues working with his people. After returning home, the war general visits Gajas in his workshop and finds him installing a special new asset in the Viver. This time, Gajas calls his invention the Blood Grail, an even greater ether reactor with more than enough power to take down any demon or jet thruster. The war general, who's later identified as Dolodio, thanks Gajas for creating such an effective monstrosity to help them in their fight against Ernie. In the meantime, Catalina escorts Gustav to a secret room housing the royal family's silhouette knight, Alcalorix. Gustav gazes upon the majestic knight and gets very excited when Catalina grants him ownership of it. At that moment, Ernie arranges a meeting with his people to discuss battle plans and the like. He explains to his people that he's already installed a filter on the jet thruster so they shouldn't worry about the smoke of death anymore. Instead, they should just follow his every move to take down the enemy. At one point, the entire team became very scared of attacking the enemy head-on. However, Eleonora steps in and submits herself and her army to help bring down the enemy. Everyone instantly sees the bright side of the plan and thanks the queen for coming in clutch. In the next scene, Eleonora talks to her people and encourages them to take their next fight very seriously. She incites the fighting spirit in her men and ends the speech. Following the speech, Eleonora meets with Ernesty and apologizes for placing so many responsibilities on him. Ernie teases her a little and everyone has a good laugh before the real fight begins. Over the next few days, the army and silhouette knights of Kushpercha took the fight to Zalaudek. Swords clash and knights fall in one night during battle. Commander Kunitz from Eleonora's army leads a covert team with the Azure Hawks to infiltrate Delvincull and take it down from the inside. This plan seems to work a little. However, things quickly go sideways when the Drake finally approaches Delvincull. Ernie and his people also pull up in their own levitate warship and face the Drake. Ernie, on the other hand, pilots his Ikaruga and gets himself ready for round 2 of his war on Gajas. After exchanging words with each other, both Ernesty and Gajas begin their big fight. In the meantime, David gives his people the order to ram the Viver with their anti-air ship. The Viver spots them quickly and fires bullets at them. David lets his ship get close enough and then takes a very sharp turn to the right. The Viver pursues the ship and climbs into the clouds, an appropriate altitude for them to go all out. Ernie's men begin their attack by firing javelin spears towards the Viver and allowing the Viver to shoot the spear down. After doing this, globules of oil splatter on Viver's body. Ernie and his people then shoot the globules with fireballs to set them on fire. In a matter of seconds, the entire body of the Viver is covered in flames. Ernesty gets much closer to them and prepares for his last preemptive strike. Before he gets close enough, Gajas urges Dolodios to use the Blood Grail reactor. The war general, while contemplating using them, figures out that their city below has been infiltrated from the inside. He gives the order to unleash the Blood Grail and let it loose. The Blood Grail creates a red aura around the Viver and gives it a much bigger appearance. Ernie and the others are a little shocked by this invention, but Ernie, being the stubborn boy he is, keeps on attacking the ship. Sadly, none of his attacks worked against the Viver as its power output had already been increased tenfold. Back on the ground, Edgar faces the swordsman Gustav. The Azure Hawk finally releases the drawbridge, allowing more reinforcement to attack Zalaudek's Black Knights. Meanwhile, Ernie decides to take a dangerous approach. He fires up his Ikaruga, unsheathes his two-pronged spear, loads it with lots of mana to create lightning, and charges at the Viver's aura to pierce the aura and attack the real ship point blank. So far so good. Ernie's plan works as he pierces through the strong aura and attacks the real ship. The fight between Gustav and Edgar gets heated with each minute. Edgar struggles to keep up with Gustav's fast attacks. At one point, he eventually holds Gustav's swords in place and traps Gustav for an incoming attack from someone else. Before Gustav can take himself out of the situation, Emrise arrives and blasts him away from his silhouette knight. With only a few meters between himself and the real Viver ship, Ernie attacks the ship with all he's got. He manages to land a lot of beams at the Viver ship and destroys the Blood Grail aura. When he's done with the ship, all that's left is only enough power to pilot the ship for one last run. Dolodios admits defeat but then decides to crash the ship into the fortress and kill Eleonora in the explosion. Thankfully, Ernie quickly gets wind of his plan, so he follows him down the clouds to stop him. Ernie catches up to the ship and maxes his jet thrusters to its full power as he counters the speed of the ship to slow it down. Still, this wasn't enough to stop Dolodios as he kept firing his purple beams at the Queen's base. Archie, without thinking, gets into his Centurion Knight and charges towards the cockpit. There, he cuts Dolodios away from the controls and finally allows the ship to be redirected by Ernie to a safe location to crash into. Ernie urges Archie to abandon the Centurion Mech and jump into his arms so he can be saved. Archie does just that and gets saved in no time. That night, the long battle between Zalaudek and Kushpercha came to an end. In the spring of the Western year of 1823, Zalaudek's forces surrendered to the Occidents, and Eleonora was officially crowned to rule over Kushpercha as the queen. A few days after the battle, Ernie and his guys pack their things to leave Kushpercha for Fremville. Before leaving, Eleonora decides to say her final goodbyes to a special someone. She visits Archie and thanks him for saving her back then. She falls silent and expects Archie to hug her or kiss her or something. However, our boy Archie stands aloof and walks away. Eleonora gives him a long hug and finally lets him go. Hours later, Ernie and his team of merry engineers and night runners finally head back to their hometown with their own levitate ship. On the flip side, Gajas catches up to Ernie and his people on their way to Fremville. He studies the new models for the Silhouette ship and promises to return with something better. In the next scene, Ambrosius thanks Ernie and his team once again for bringing peace back to the Occident. He asks Ernie for a reward and Ernie requests to be given a small lab for him and his team to work with. After getting his laboratory, Ernie encourages his team to keep fighting and creating more knights to make all their dreams come true. Over the next few months, Ernie mass produces levitate ships and allows commercial flights through countries.
Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.